The final college football playoff quarterfinal game is going to be pretty wild. We've got number 7 Notre Dame, who has consistently struggled to win the big game, taking on number 2 Georgia, champions of the SEC, but will be without their starting quarterback in Carson Beck. It's going to be a crazy game at the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day night, and we are here to share our official prediction on who will advance to the semifinals. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. So glad you could join us today. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of those expert picks, and our holiday special, where we are hitting over 60% of our bold picks so far this year, and are doing extremely well on our NFL picks as well. And that holiday special giving you our NFL picks for the rest of the year, all the way through the Super Bowl in February. So do not miss out on that. The link for it down in the description below. We'd love for you to become a member of our GE Nation and win big with us today. So, again, number 7 versus number 2 Notre Dame in this position because they did beat Indiana in the opening round of the playoff 27-17, a game that was much more lopsided than that final score would show. The Fighting Irish outgaining the Hoosiers 394-278, and again, Indiana getting some late garbage time touchdowns there. Georgia in this position because they did win the SEC championship over Texas, but in the process lost their starting quarterback Carson Beck, obviously injured, his elbow, going to undergo some surgery, and already committed to entering the NFL draft. So it's the Gunnar Stockton show entering New Year's Day night in New Orleans, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But a very, very intriguing battle, one that could be relatively low scoring because of the style of both these offenses, because of Georgia's injury to Carson Beck, and because of how strong both these defenses can be. But we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. We'll start with Notre Dame, where it's all about running the ball. Notre Dame, to win, has to run the ball. They average nearly 420 yards per game, but 222 of them are on the ground. They rush for 222.4 rushing yards per game. It's 11th in the nation. Jeremiah Love, of course, leads the way, over 1,000 yards on the year and 16 touchdowns. Right behind him is their quarterback, Riley Leonard, who's rushed for 751 yards and 15 touchdowns. And then you've got Jadarian Price as well, 683 yards and 7 touchdowns. So those 3 players combining for 38 rushing touchdowns, and all of them having rushed for at least 680 yards. So 2 600-plus yard running backs, a quarterback who's rushed for over 750, 38 combined touchdowns between the 3 of them. It's pretty dang impressive. And I mean, you just look. Notre Dame runs well against everybody. They've been held to under 200 rushing yards. Again, I sometimes think it's good if you can eclipse 100, 120. Notre Dame has been held to less than 200 rushing yards just 5 times this year in 13 games. They've been held to under 150 rushing yards just twice this season. They had 93 versus Indiana. Again, that was the number 1 ranked rushing defense at the time. They had 258 against USC, 273 against Army, 234 against Virginia, and the list goes on and on and on. Those are just some of their most recent games. They are extremely impressive on the ground. But the million-dollar question becomes, if Notre Dame's rushing game gets stopped, if Riley Leonard is unable to run the ball, escape the pocket, extend the plays, if Jeremiah Love doesn't bust out for big-time runs, and it becomes a game where Riley Leonard has to throw the ball by himself and win the game through the air, can he do it? We haven't had to see him do that all year. He's thrown for over 2,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions. He takes great care of the football. He's not a bad passer by any means, but does Notre Dame have the pass-catching core, the wide receiver core, to beat this Georgia secondary? Does Riley Leonard have the ability to lead potential game-winning drives or scoring drives solely through the air against this Georgia defense if the running game were to be completely taken away and essentially become a non-factor? Keep in mind, you look at Georgia's defense, we'll talk about them in a second, but how well they have played against teams that can run the ball. They had a couple bad performances here and there, but I'm looking at 2 games in particular against Texas, both in the regular season and in the SEC championship, where they bottled up that Texas run game, completely stifled it, and then ultimately won both of those games. So Notre Dame wants to run the ball. They're not going to stray away from what's been working, but if it gets shut down, can Riley Leonard deliver as a passer? That is the million-dollar question. Georgia, they have bigger questions, right? Gunnar Stockton, he is making his first career start in the playoff quarterfinals against one of the best defenses in the country. Not the most ideal start, right? Typically, you'd want to kind of get your feet wet somewhere else. Against a weaker opponent, maybe a game that he feels more of a surefire victory. Instead, he's playing at a neutral site, an electric crowd, biggest game of his career, biggest game of the year for Georgia against one of the best defenses we mentioned in the entire nation. Stockton has thrown just 32 passes all year long. He went 12 for 16 with an interception in the SEC championship game after Carson Beck went down, and ultimately did win that game. Or, Georgia did win that game. Was it 22-19 in overtime? So in a way, led them to victory. Although I wouldn't say that was more of because of the play of Stockton. I'd say it's more because of the play of Georgia's rushing game and Georgia's defense. But Notre Dame boasts the number 3 passing defense in the country. Stockton has his hands full in this one. He's facing an elite secondary. And if you look at Georgia's offense as a whole throughout this year, even with Carson Beck under center, it really wasn't that electric. They had a lot of issues. They were not nearly as good on offense as we thought they'd be. Maybe not as good as they should have been with Carson Beck under center. And Beck obviously having a lot of issues down the stretch with turnovers and just his play as a whole. So when I'm looking at Georgia's offense entering this game, it kind of comes down to 2 things. But the biggest thing is their run game. You are trying to take as much pressure off of Gunnar Stockton as you can. You would love to come in here and just be able to run it right down Notre Dame's throat to the point where Gunnar Stockton rarely has to throw the ball, and when he does, he doesn't have to take shots down the field. This running game is going to be massive for the Bulldogs. They're averaging 129 rushing yards per game on the year, but I will say Nate Frazier and Trevor Etienne seem to be kind of hitting their stride, getting a little bit hotter. Etienne, 94 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in their last game against Texas in the SEC championship game. It feels like they're starting to pick things up just a little bit. But on the flip side, they've only had, 3 games where they've rushed for over 150 yards? And those have come against weaker opponents. They rushed for 166 against Tennessee Tech, 208 against UMass. The only quality team where they've rushed for over 150 was against Clemson back in the season opener when they rushed for 169. They mustered just 59 rushing yards against Ole Miss, only 80 rushing yards against Alabama, only 102 against Kentucky, 108 against Georgia Tech. I mean, they haven't been able to run the ball that effectively. So does that change now? Or do they continue to struggle? Does Notre Dame's defense continue to bottle it up and force Gunnar Stockton to win the game solely by himself through the air in his first career start? That is where it's interesting to me. Georgia's offense hasn't been that great all year, even with their starting quarterback there. Now he's not there. I don't think we can expect it to all of a sudden get 10 times better, especially in a game like this against one of the best defenses in the nation. Notre Dame, as we mentioned, has the number 3 passing defense in the entire country. They're allowing, 262 passing yards per game? That is it. So they're not going to give up many big plays, I wouldn't think, to the air to Gunnar Stockton. However, like Georgia, Notre Dame is down a very key player. Georgia is down their star quarterback. Notre Dame is down their best pass rusher, Riley Mills, who led the team with 7.5 sacks. So kind of a sigh of relief if you're Georgia, kind of a sigh of relief if you're Gunnar Stockton saying, hey, Notre Dame's still got a good pass rush. They still got a great defense, but their best defensive player on that defensive line that's going to be coming after me every single play, he's not going to be there. It's a massive break for Georgia, a massive blow for Notre Dame in a game like this, a massive, massive loss. But Notre Dame still need to find a way to create pressure. They have forced 29 turnovers on the year. That includes 18 interceptions. If you can get after Gunnar Stockton, force him to get into second, third, and long situations, force him to throw a couple interceptions in this game, you're going to be just fine. And that's going to be, if I'm Marcus Freeman, if I'm the Fighting Irish, I'm looking at this saying, we've got to do everything in our power defensively to rattle this guy. We've got to get after him, make him uncomfortable. Do not allow him to settle in. Additionally, on top of that, they've got to find a way to, stop the run. If I'm Notre Dame, I'm stacking the box. I'm daring Gunnar Stockton to beat me through the air. I'm daring him to try to take shots down the field and to beat me. Bottle up the run. Don't allow Georgia to run the ball effectively. Don't allow many big plays on the ground, and force Gunnar Stockton to have to push the ball. Because with new quarterbacks, you're always going to try to get them comfortable. You're going to go for quick screen passes, quick little slants across the middle, just to get those quick, easy completions to help them settle in. I'm cool giving those up if I'm Notre Dame, as long as they don't turn into big plays. And that's key number 2. Yeah, pressure the quarterback, try to force turnovers, stop the run. But more than anything, I don't expect Georgia to want to try to take too many shots down the field unless they have to. I don't expect them to try to push it with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, which means most of the throws I would expect that he's going to take and most of the throws he's going to attempt are going to be relatively short, behind the line of scrimmage or barely past the line of scrimmage, things like that. If you're Notre Dame, you have to make sure that's as far as they go. You cannot allow Georgia to take a quick little bubble screen and take it 20 yards. You cannot allow a slant across the middle to turn into a 25, 30-yard gain. You have to make those open field tackles. You have to ensure that Georgia does not get extra yards on plays that really shouldn't be going anywhere. You know that's what they're going to do. You know they're going to try to ease his quarterback in there. If you're not able to get pressure on him, you've got to make sure his passes basically mean nothing. And eventually force him to the point to take deeper shots down the field, to try to push the ball down the field, which there gives you a better chance to get some interceptions, where, of course, you have 18 on the year. That's what Notre Dame needs to do defensively. Will it happen? I don't know. Marcus Freeman is one of the best defensive minds in the game. Their defense has been one of the best all year long. They've been extremely hot, one of the best teams in the country all year long. I'm sure they're looking their chops a little bit, facing a guy making his first career start in a game of this magnitude. Georgia, on the other hand, their defense, typically strong as well. Kirby Smart, one of the best defensive minds in the game. Another reason this game could be relatively low scoring. But this defense hasn't been as strong as it's been in years past. Not as strong as it's been in the years where Georgia won national championships. They're giving up 337 yards per game. They're giving up nearly 210 passing yards per game. A little over 128 rushing yards per game. And somewhat similar to the key for Notre Dame defensively, it goes the same for Georgia. Stop the run. Force Riley Leonard to win this game through the air. Notre Dame wants to run the ball. They're amazing at running the ball. That's what they want to do. That's what they've done all year long. You've got to find a way to stop it and say, Riley Leonard, a guy who doesn't want to take many shots down the field, a Notre Dame pass-catching core that isn't all that great, force them to have to win a game all by themselves. Problem is, Georgia has been exploited before. They've been exploited on the ground before. They allowed 173 rushing yards to Alabama, 132 to Ole Miss, 260 rushing yards to Georgia Tech, a game they probably should have lost, 146 rushing yards in that game against Tennessee. We've seen teams run the ball effectively against the Bulldogs. They've done it all year long. Georgia has struggled running the ball themselves, and they've struggled at stopping it. Again, 173 to Bama, 260 to Georgia Tech. Those are uncharacteristic numbers from Kirby Smart's defense. And now you're facing an electric offensive line, a big offensive line, and a great rushing attack that has three guys, including a quarterback that you've got to account for, that have rushed for over 680 yards. That's a tough task. Tough task. But that's the key. If Georgia bottles up that run game, I don't have faith in Riley Leonard solely winning the game by himself. I just don't. I don't think Notre Dame having to switch their mindset and their philosophy of going from run first to pass first, it would work well in a game like this against these athletes that Georgia has. But that's what Georgia's going to have to do. So what's going to happen, guys? I mean, this is an interesting game, right? I mean, the first two playoff games are going to be fun, but the last two on New Year's Day, are the Rose Bowl between Ohio State and Oregon, and this game in the Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia, to me, are going to be the best two games, the most interesting games. And, you know, it could come back to bite me in time. I think it's typically unwise to bet against Kirby Smart, to pick against Georgia. But I think I'm going to do it this time around. And again, it could come back to bite me. And I'll own up to it if it does. But this Notre Dame defense, even with the loss of Riley Mills, is still absolutely outstanding. And I don't think Georgia all of a sudden is going to find their rushing attack and just torch this Notre Dame rushing defense. I don't see it happen. I don't see them waking up and having a massive day on the ground. Gunnar Stockton is going to have to take shots down the field if Georgia wants to win this game. Either that, or Georgia's going to have to force a lot of turnovers to set up Gunnar Stockton in very good field position, inside the 20, inside the red zone, in plus territory, to where it's easy enough to get either a field goal or an easy touchdown. I don't think that's going to happen either. I think Notre Dame comes in here, slows this game down, controls the clock. They succeed running the ball. Georgia has struggled at stopping it for the majority of the year. I don't think that changes now. Even if they do, while I don't have faith in Riley Leonard winning the game solely by himself, I like his experience 10 times more than that of Gunnar Stockton. So quarterback-wise, Notre Dame's got the edge. Running game-wise, Notre Dame's got the edge. Notre Dame, ironically, has the offensive edge in this game. And you could argue they have the defensive edge as well, despite losing Riley Mills. It might be relatively close. But I'm going to go with the Fighting Irish here. I think they get the job done. I think it's a low-scoring game. But ultimately, Stockton struggles against this good of a defense. The Fighting Irish win a low-scoring, close game in New Orleans, finally gets over the hump, wins the big game, and they will be playing in the college football playoff semifinals. Whether it's against Penn State or Boise State, that remains to be seen. But the Fighting Irish will be one win away from playing for a national title. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of those expert picks. Holiday special there as well, there for you to win big with us. One of the best prices in the country, some of the best picks in the country. Do not miss out. The link for it, again, in the description below. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.